Mariners are playing pretty good, right? 8 out of last 9 series. They're in first place. 4 games over 500. We would have took this, but also we're also kind of, it's just a weird feeling. I don't know if we feel spoiled or we're just being spoiled brats, or we are expecting too much. But I think I want to just chalk it up to like, hey, we know this team is very close to being an elite team in this league, and we know what the other elite teams do, especially on offense. And that's what we want to talk about today. And also maybe a little bit about the overusage or the concern of the overusage of the bullpen, especially, but also what how the offense affects all that. I think that's like what we should talk about. We haven't talked in a minute. What do you think?
Yeah, lots to talk about.
Get ready to play hardball in the Kingdom.
Take me to the ball game. I want to see the M's. The Mariners are playing hardball. Did it again and again and again. Did it again.
Princess Tours, the vacation company, brings you the best show in baseball when the San Diego Chicken plays hardball with the Seattle Mariners and the Baltimore Orioles tonight in the Kingdom.
What up? This is Myron, and you are listening or watching the Rye Bread and Mustard of Mariners podcast at Down on the Docks on the other side of the tracks, 5-star dive bar of and about the Seattle Mariners that you're listening or watching wherever the hell you're doing this. But listen, if you are on YouTube, a subscribe would really help. If you don't see everything lit up and pounded on there, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Anyways, I am here at MVPs on Highway 99 in lovely Edmonds, but at the home studio, we got Hanno. He's back on the episode. What's going down, Hanno?
How goes it? Welcome back to the Northwest.
All right, man. All right, Hanno. Mariners. There's really no real reason to be upset about what's been going on and where we're at, but we still are feeling, I don't know. It's so weird to be 4 games over 500 in first place. We haven't, been off to a steady start in years. Yeah, I'm still sitting around with, I think like a lot of Mariners fans are, a lot of Mariners pundits people are. Still a lot of questions. We don't know what this offense really is. It wears a different mask or an outfit, it seems like, every single game. It's pretty evident that the Mariners have the best starting rotation in baseball and one of the best bullpens in baseball, but it's also getting used quite a bit. How you feeling right now, right before we hit this big road trip?
Yeah, I mean, I got to feel pretty good. 3 games, 4 games over 500 is great. I guess the thing of it is being in first place and not playing their best ball. Still a lot of mistakes, base running. The bullpen's a little bit shaky here and there. Some injuries. Guys are getting used a lot. I mean, but other than that, they're in first place, and they got off to a hot start, through the first quarter pole of the season. So, yeah, I can't really say too much other than that. But they're right in the mix. But it seems like they have to add a lot more or turn it on a lot more to be a serious contender. I mean, there's a long ways to go. I feel like the Astros are still going to make a push, Texas and all, but each of these teams has, blemishes and some questions, but you got to be happy with how the Mariners, we've asked them to start a lot better in the first half of the season, and wouldn't you know, they've done a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, and, just to be even more specific, we wanted them to get off to a good start. Like we were saying, we were like, hey, once we get through this tough part of the schedule going into games like this big road trip where you're going into Baltimore, you're going into the Yankees, and you looked at the Mariners schedule from the last week of March through April through May, we've mentioned this a lot, especially in the preseason and even when we were getting going. It wasn't a cakewalk. The Mariners won at this point 8 series out of the last 9. And these weren't bad teams. I mean, you go back to like where it started. Cincinnati, when they came in, was a good team. And outside of that, the the series we went to down in Denver versus the Colorado Rockies. That's about the only series that when we looked at this batch of teams, and maybe Oakland when we first were looking at it, but Oakland has, it seems like they're treading in the right direction as at least a tough team to play. Uh, they've beaten the Braves. They've beaten Kansas City. A lot of teams over 500 or first place teams they beat in the series matchup, not necessarily getting in a groove. Like we haven't seen them get on a streak. It seems like uh, win the first game, lose the second game, win the third game, or some sort of combination of that. I mean, obviously, winning all these series, they ran into Minnesota in Minnesota, and Minnesota's a good team. So it's like for them to be 4 games over 500 in first place, playing the teams that they have played, that some of these tough teams in the rear view, you'd be happy with this. But also, there seems like there's so much, I guess, meat left on the bone or on the table, right? When you look at this team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with all that. And, you mentioned where they didn't win a series against Minnesota. Yeah, they're a good team, but we haven't had it all this year, and especially in a series where the starting pitching kind of let you down. And that
Yeah.
was surprising, but they're due to have a rough little stretch. And, I mean, that's basically it from the first part of the season where the starting pitching just didn't look that great. I guess if we start talking about more pitching, I'm a little concerned with the bullpen with the injuries and riding guys so hard. I mean, we're rolling Munoz out there for lots of outs. He's doing the job, but there's really not another guy to count on right now. And hopefully he doesn't get run into the ground like Brash. But, I mean, you got to get – so, I mean, it's tough, but like I said, they got to make some adjustments and trust some other guys, or guys are going to be tired early.
Yeah, you mentioned that the bullpen. You and I have talked about this quite a bit. I was listening to Ryan Roland Smith. I think anybody that is knows anything about pitching or pays attention to that is like, yeah, those 5 out saves are awesome, but they add up, especially when he's having to do this because we are probably lacking one of those high leverage guys, right? Like if you had somebody else to go to, you'd go to them, but it seems like they don't. But at the same time, I do applaud Scott Service on one hand of realizing and making this clear that like, hey, these games in April and May stack up on you. When you end up missing the playoffs by a game or two. So I do like the importance of going out there and getting them. I do like the importance of like, hey, let's go out there and get this W. But you're right. This isn't sustainable. You can't do this. You're going to have to get another high leverage guy, or another high leverage guy is going to emerge. I know that there's Spire who gets you out of jams, and then you had Stanek, and we've talked about Stanek before, how lucky the Mariners are to have him, but at the same time, we've seen him so much, and he's on the other side of 30, and he's thrown a lot in his career already, and we've kind of seen him kind of go through this little bit of spell up, but I'm sure that happens. That goes hand in hand with being used a lot. I know we've kind of talked about also, I want to bring this up. We obviously we're like, hey, the Mariners got to go out and get another high leverage arm or bring somebody in. But also what also could cure this and not have to do that so much is if the offense turns around, if you can score runs and not have to finish a game with your high leverage players every single game, then you don't run into this problem as much. And then it's like, okay, it's cool that he got a 5-out save if he does it once a week.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If we can get a tick from that offense and not play in these tight games, 1 or 2 run games, or gotten some length out of our starters, but then the bullpen and our guys that are just not household names or guys we haven't seen that much, leak the lead away, or they get a little bit closer, then you're going to have to go to Munoz, and I totally understand why Scott has to go to his guys that he trusts. So, but you're exactly right. If we can get that offense going a little more and guys start clicking, it'll make his life and the bullpen's life a lot easier.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's going to be this desperate need to go and grab another arm. I'm sure they will, but the biggest way to help these arms out there and rest these arms out there and not run somebody into the ground like they did with Brash is if we can win games once in a while like they did last week, a nice little 8-1, 8-2, 8-4, just having a 5 or 6 run lead where you can just throw somebody out there that's going to throw strikes and it's okay to bend and not break. But those situations are few and far between just because the offense hasn't gotten going. And when you look at the offense not going, it's main key guys in big RBI situations, the strikeouts with runners in scoring position. It's the same old story. We don't need to go down the list. Everybody that's listening knows what we're talking about. So we don't need to get so in depth with that. But I would say a lot of these guys, and I think you probably agree with me, a lot of the guys that are the role players and or you know platoon guys and all of that has worked out great for the Mariners. We're right now we're seeing the emergence of Luke Raley now, who's in the lineup every single day. The last 2 weeks been mashing the ball. We obviously know about Josh Rojas's story. Look what Dylan Moore has done while JP's been out. Sure, Mitch Haniger's ran into a little bit of a slump here, but he's played so much more than what was expected by any of us. Ty France seems to be being less pedestrian of late. Now it's a big thing of like the talk, hey, we got to get another bat in here. We do. I agree with that. The other thing is somebody like Julio, once he can finally start getting these big offensive numbers like the doubles and the slugging and the home runs, that will be just like adding a superstar to our lineup, because a superstar has not arrived yet in our lineup. Cal Raleigh, big clutch. He's doing what you'd expect from him. We haven't seen it from Julio, and I don't know if we're ever going to see it from Polanco or Mitch Garver, the way they want to do it. But as far as Julio, I feel like we've said this before, kind of feels like Wallflowery, just kind of fits in. But then you go and look at it, he leads this team with hits by like 10 hits.
Yeah, absolutely. And he gets the, he does all right, but it feels like he hasn't been the dominant type of player or the player that can take over a game that we expect. Oh, the thing started on you when you mentioned Raley. First off, is he was acquired for Caballero from Tampa, and remember we had those injuries with Canzone, and they decided to go with Clase out there and play a while, which was. I get bringing a guy up and throwing him in the fire, don't just let him sit. But Raley, I thought they'd go to more often, and they finally have circled back around and given him the time, and he's taken advantage and played really well, starting to hit the long ball. Love his aggressiveness on the bases. He plays the game hard, and it's really nice to see. And we're going to need his success to continue to help out that lineup.
Yeah, and that fucker can run. I remember my first time I saw him. I think it was in person. Was down in San Diego during the last exhibition games, and I remember texting you because I never really watched Luke Raley. We knew him as a corner outfielder, decent with the glove. The reports were he had some speed, had some power, and I saw him playing first base, and I was like, what the fuck are they feeding this guy? Because just in my brain, I didn't realize how big this dude is. And I was like, oh, great, here's another big base clogging guy up, and boy, was I fucking wrong. This dude hustles. This dude runs the bases probably on the Mariners. I want to go out on a limb here. He's probably the smartest base runner on the entire Mariners roster.
Yeah, if not that, he's one of the most heads up base runners, that's for sure. I mean, he's a freaking thoroughbred out there while he's running around those bases. I mean, he
Yeah.
runs hard and he's sliding hard in the bases, reading the ball pretty well off the bat. He's a better above average base runner that I've seen from this Mariner team, and I'm pretty critical of the base running and noticing the jumps that these guys get or lack thereof. He seems to do a great job. Case in point, the last game of this last series against KC, where he beat a force play out at third. So yeah, heads up baseball player.
Yeah, I felt bad for our boy Adam Frazier. Couldn't clean that, get that ball really clean, and then he had to race as hard as he could running to third base to to get to the base before the runner, and he's looking up at a big thoroughbred running into third base like that. That's probably not a great great feeling.
No, I mean, if he got there a little bit sooner and didn't get the right angle and got ran over by him, I could have seen Frazier in the third row there.
Yeah. Luke Raley, and with Canzone out there, we just saw this in the Kansas City series, in the finale. Canzone and Raley on the corners with Julio. I really like that look out there.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. Haniger's been great, been ran really hard, like you said. He can give you a couple hits a game, get you a bomb early on, and then, they play him so often. Unfortunately, that wasn't really the plan, but it looks like he's worn out a little bit. It's been nice to see him platoon quite a bit, but I would like to see a lot more of that Canzone and Raley on the corners and be able to then give Mitch a day off or rotate Mitch and Garver at DH and have one of those guys coming off your bench. That kind of seems ideal right now to me.
Yeah. Look, Haniger, great hard playing player, was holding up, the team here in the first couple of weeks when things weren't going on. When he's used sparingly, I shouldn't say sparingly, just when he's not ran out there every single day, that's when you're going to get the best Mitch. But to be honest, he hasn't been all that great in the field. He's kind of had some of these uncharacteristic errors or blunders that we're not used to seeing. But again, that's probably comes from just being out there so damn much. But also, would you rather have him out in the outfield, Hanno, or this guy who caught the 2 foul balls the other night at the Mariners game? We got to talk about him, right?
Unbelievable. I mean, that got a lot of press. I mean, it was so crazy. A lot. Yeah, I mean, the kid, man, lucky for him. I mean, I've been in a lot of games, not even come close to one. He caught him with the same player up to bat and back-to-back pitches. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, I read the story in Seattle Times about how he went with his grandfather, and his grandfather jokingly said, he's got like seeing problems. He's older. Like, hey, you're gonna have to catch all the balls tonight if anything comes our way. He's like, all right, Grandpa, I got your back, man. I mean, yeah, it's a big press. Like, I remember the email the next day from MLB that you get your daily email. And it wasn't about anything going on in the league. It was about this guy catching 2 foul balls. And they said, I think the odds are 0.00001 of that happening.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, good for the kid. He protected Grandpa really well.
Baseball sure has changed, Junior.
Yeah, the hexagon replaced the diamond.
And can you imagine facing 3 pitches?
Emerson on base. Oh, the base ejector got him snoozing. He goes
Why did
sailing.
it all change?
All sport. Game just got too easy.
The unsurpassed taste of all sport. A third more carbs than Gatorade for energy could make the difference.
Next up,
Your grandson's up.
Ken Griffey the fourth. Next, it's going. Watch out, center point. Oh!
Center Bliss got him.
He was robbed.
All sport body quencher. The game will never be the same.
Yeah, but as far as the outfield, right now, Mariners outfield looking good. You got Haniger. When you got to put him out there, put him out there. You got Raley, you got Canzone, obviously got Julio, you got Dylan Moore. You can also shove Rojas out there. We're in a good spot. I mean, we had to send Sam Haggerty back down to the minors. There's in such a good spot as far as putting bodies out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, with being satisfied with where it is, I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't have to go out and get another bat. It doesn't mean an outfielder batted or infield bat. They just need somebody else. And we mentioned the bullpen. To me, we're going to talk about this big road trip coming up, which is big. But like I've said before, the biggest day coming up for me is the trading deadline. Seeing where the Mariners are going to be, if they're going to be in first place, and if they're going to go out and acquire somebody, and how many people, and really go for it. Because a lot of guys on their team, I've been reading say they look like a World Series contender. I definitely think they could make the playoffs and make a deep run. Everybody says that with their starting staff. But they're so close, but it'd just be nice to see them add and really go for it. So for me, I just can't wait to see what happens in a few weeks, months coming up to actually see if they pull the trigger and how they pull the trigger.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and something you said right there is really interesting. Is like you see the rumors out there, like, hey, are we going to go get the polar bear to play first base? But
Pete Alonso, we're talking about here.
Yep, Pete Alonso. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to get a first baseman. You could get a corner outfielder. You could get another infielder that mashes the ball with the versatility that we have with a Dylan Moore and the versatility we have with a Rojas or even Luke Raley, who can come in and play first base.
Yeah, I mean, it's been talked about, I think, a little bit with Ty France struggling, but he has picked it up of late. Maybe he's been listening to people talking of maybe possibly Luke Raley playing first because his bat is hot, being then throwing Haniger with Rojas out in the corners, and then substitution late in games defensively because you can really trust Ty France's dig. So there's a lot of possibilities, and the Mariners have really put together a roster where guys can be interchangeable, and interesting to see if they do that and try to just play the hot hand. But Ty has forced them not to have to do that lately with getting large, I should say, hitting the long ball.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he's got more home runs than Julio.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll come around for me. I know he's young. People say that all the time. But just the lack of focus on the base pass kills me. That can lose you games later on in the year, and why not get it cleaned up now? And he's had quite a few of those lately, sliding off bases, getting picked off bases. It's inexcusable in my opinion. But one time, two times, yeah, but it's a big pattern now. It's more than that.
Yeah, let's get into that because that is something that you're very passionate about, and we actually had a listener send us something here on Twitter or X about the base running, and they sent us a chart, and I'm going to pull this chart up right now. And basically, in this tweet that got tweeted at us, it is it's in reference to our talking about the base running, and it says that Julio is statistically the third worst base runner on the Mariners right now. It was what they sent to me.
Wow.
And if I pull up the chart here, I'll put it on the YouTube thing. But that is interesting. But when you talk about offenses, of course, that is going to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, he can control that and either not be so aggressive or not be so lackadaisical. And those are just flat out mental mistakes, in my opinion. And it's bothersome, like, because for me, most of all, because it's a pattern. But young player, I get that argument. I understand that. But base running, man, it's pretty simple. I mean, he's got the speed, but he's got to keep his head in the game when he's on the base pass.
This whole pop-up slide thing, like you've talked about this, it has not been working, and maybe I don't know what his speed's like right now, but maybe he's not as fast as the 2022 Julio. But I missed that face first slide. I understand it's a thing that they don't want him to do, but he doesn't look comfortable sliding feet first.
No, he really doesn't. You're exactly right. It looks like he slides a little late. His lead foot that he reaches out, I've mentioned before, doesn't stretch to the base, straight out towards it to beat the throws. I mean, if they want to park a slip and slide in right center field, I'll show them how to slide.
So again, on the third worst base running, I just pulled it up. It's from Deanna Lane at Deanna Lane 2009. Thank you, Deanna, for this. And what it is a screenshot from, I believe, I don't know what it's his Statcast, Fangraphs. It's from Fangraphs, and Julio. It says here on base running is 0.9. Jorge Polanco 0. Jorge Polanco also a negative 0.9. Let me see who else. Dylan Moore, for example, is a 0.09. The only person that we have. Oh no! Do you want to know who the worst person on the team is base running? This has got to be the easiest
Ty
question. This is
France?
like yeah, negative 1.4. But Ty France is maybe one of the worst base runners we've ever seen, and a lot of that doesn't have to do with his smarts. It has to do with like him getting thrown and sent in situations he shouldn't be there. And he's a negative 1.4, and Julio's a negative 0.9. To put that into perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if they take in his God-given ability of not having speed, that's a little unfortunate, but whatever,
Yeah, but thanks, Deanna. I thought that was pretty cool. Also,
Absolutely.
we're recording here. I am at least live at MVP's Bar and Grill here on Highway 99 in beautiful Edmonds. We had somebody come over to the table, an anonymous note, not a phone number. It's a note, and it says this. And I'm gonna ask you this, Hanno. Would you trade Wu or Hancock for a bat?
I probably would go with Hancock because I think Wu has a bigger upside, but that's tough because I think you're going to need six guys with the way injuries can go, and it's such an advantage of having a guy like a Hancock to slip in there, call him up from Tacoma. If some guy gets a sore arm, you see Wu has had a fatigued arm a little bit with just coming back from being on the DL, but he's working through it. And we know that arm injuries happen. So if I had to choose a player, I would choose Hancock, but I'd rather not. I'd like to go probably with a prospect, but it's going to cost probably one of those guys if you were to go and get like a Pete Alonso. But it's tough to do a trade like that when he is on the last year of his contract. So there's a lot of variables depending on what kind of trade you make with which player to decipher what you want to do.
I agree. If I had to get rid of one of the guys, I would prefer to get rid of Hancock. Wu is farther along in his major league development, and we're seeing it right away. But Hancock is major league ready. I think he pitches on any other starting five probably in the league. Maybe there's a few that he couldn't break the starting five, but a majority of them, Hancock would be somewhere, maybe even like a 3 or a 4, depending on what team it is. But yeah, I agree. Everybody knows where the goods are at with the Mariners, and if you're looking for somebody from the Mariners that's like ready now, you are going to be having to give up Wu, a Hancock, or even a Miller. I feel like those are the 3 guys you don't want to part with. And probably the depth chart of not wanting to get rid of him is, I would say Miller, Wu, then Hancock.
Yeah, I'd go in that order as well, definitely.
Yeah, but all very close to each other as far as when I'd say, let me take that back. I think as far as Miller and Wu, you're splitting hairs. I do feel like they are a step above Hancock. and that comes with the experience and having a better track record in the last couple of years of being healthy, including Wu.
Yeah, and we've seen them almost a full year ahead of Emerson. We don't know what he can do, but he's shown that he was able to step in just like those two did last year. He has done that this year for the team, so they're on par. But as far as experience and major league experience, he's behind, and it's just the way it's worked out with those guys getting the call up earlier.
Now, let me ask you a question about something that, because we haven't talked, on air too much here, or on pod, I should say. We haven't talked too much. We haven't talked too much here on pod about something that we talked about last time me and you talked, and that was, hey, what are we gonna do when JP Crawford comes back as far as who's leading off? And your remarks, which I agree with, if somebody gets hurt, they shouldn't just lose their job just because somebody gets hot at it. But we've seen a sustained amount of time of Josh Rojas hitting in the one slot, and JP Crawford coming back probably this series, if I would assume at the latest in New York. Maybe he'll be in the lineup tonight. But what are you doing now? Because I think there's a lot has happened since we were actually just pondering that as hey, somebody's hot right now, and now this has gone on for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, let me break some news to you. So Thursday night, JP was doing a rehab assignment down in Tacoma, and in his last at bat, got beamed in the wrist. I didn't know if you heard this yet. I would assume you haven't. Is that correct?
Not if I asked you this question. So.
Okay, I know. I'm just messing with you. But yeah, he did get beamed in the wrist. And appears to be okay, but I did get a report reading from one of the guys that covers the team that he did not travel as planned to Baltimore with the team. So I don't know if that means but he's sore, so who knows if they're just waiting for swelling to go down or see how he's going to be. But right now, that plan has kind of been nixed. But to answer your question, yeah, I think that he shouldn't lose his spot, but I really like what Rojas has done and setting the table. Maybe it could be a possibility of moving him into his rightful spot since he shouldn't lose his spot from being injured, and I could see moving Rojas down to number 2 and Julio down to 3 and kind of lengthening the lineup that way. That could be a possibility. But, like I said, and you mentioned, I said that you shouldn't lose your spot in the leadoff spot, but the way Rojas has come along, if they do keep him in the leadoff spot, I would understand. But with Rojas too, he hasn't played this long and had this long a track record. I could also see him starting to slump a little bit or not see the ball as well, and then moving him down to take a little pressure off of him too. So there's a lot of possibilities. So I'm just going to ride the fence on this question and kind of answer every kind of which way it could go,
Yeah, look, my feeling is with JP coming back, you're getting another proven bat in your lineup, at least last year, and he was heating up, and he's big in the clutch. I also know JP is a great team player, so I don't think he would have a problem hitting 8th or 9th. And whether it's Rojas, whether it's JP, I like that 9-1-2, which I think is an overrated. Which I think is an underrated thing in baseball. I know maybe some statistic and baseball nerds go, "What are you talking about, Meyer?" We know it's very important to have a number 9 hitter. I love when you have a great 9 hitter that can get that 9-1-2. I love that. Usually, it's a speed, contact oriented, high base percentage group right there. I do want to say this too. When I feel like what I would do right now, I'd probably just keep Rojas there until it was an issue. Either him, coming down from cloud nine and what he's doing, and or if JP just heats up where you're like, we have to have this bat at the top of the lineup, but also it also could be interchangeable. We've seen in the past Julio lead off and when JP's not playing, and JP kind of has been our leadoff hitter, then not our leadoff hitter, and then solidified himself last year as our leadoff hitter. But as long as JP's in the lineup, or Rojas is down at the end of the lineup, I don't care. My main thing is just getting that extra bat back. And look, Rojas didn't just start hitting good at the one spot. He was doing a lot of this damage that he has, not so much the power numbers, but he was doing good at 8 and 9. And then once he got put up in the number one spot, I feel like it's gotten showcased more. He's also gotten more at bats up at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, and another attribute, like you mentioned, with having Crawford at hitting 9 and him, Rojas hitting first. I mean, Rojas gives you more of a chance of stealing a bag like a prototypical leadoff hitter has been in the past, where he does steal bases for you, where JP really doesn't. So that's another thing too, where it kind of makes more sense. So yeah, I mean, I can go along with your idea totally. I like it.
Yeah, my thing is the debate to me is not a debate if they're both in the lineup. I would be like, I'm fine with Rojas hitting later in the lineup, but I also feel like, hey, if something's really working right now, the way this offense is, you don't really have the room to tinker with it much. You got to just go with what's going.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean,
and we've seen more games than we've seen more games lately than we have, which isn't saying much, but with the offense jumping on the board early, we've seen that more often. Not enough, but we've seen it more often.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to see. It's baseball and the Mariners can make it stressful on you where they get that lead. Depending on the starter does, and like we mentioned before, if the bullpen with the injuries, we really don't have we have the shutdown guy at the end, but Stanek, he's shaky. Do like him. Kind of would like him maybe in the previous inning type guy, not the guy before the closer in the best of all worlds, or even a guy before that. But the way the bullpen's constructed with injuries, he's been placed in that. So, my point is, like you said in the very beginning, let's get some more runs and get some cushion to make it a softer landing and easier on this team going down the stretch.
Yeah, it's not. So what are we going to do with the tired arms? What are we going to do with the high leverage guys that have thrown, Munoz at the time of this recording, I think he's had 17 appearances or 17 late inning appearances, and 7 of them have been for more than an inning.
Yeah, and that's unheard of for him in his career with the Mariners.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty unheard of if it's like post 1979. I mean,
yeah, Dennis Eckerly back in the day.
Right, because this was some Goose Gossage shit. You know what I mean?
Oh,
but it's interesting too because we've talked about this before. Scott Service is a catcher. If you're a pitcher or a catcher, you think you'd really be on top of this and not want to do that because you know what that does in that position. If Scott Service never played a lick in the major leagues, or he was an offensive player that turned into a manager, I could easily understand. But it is very strange that a general manager, president of baseball operations, a former bullpen pitcher, and a catcher.
Yeah, but the thing
don't have more discretion.
Yeah, and as well as me, and we've seen it and heard it, people have been really not happy with how Scott runs his bullpen. And let's say he wasn't going to throw Mooney out there, to win the game or bring him out that extra inning, and then he brings in a second-tier guy and they lose. We'd be pissed off at that, too. That's just how it works being a fan.
Yeah. No, and again, I said this too. I applaud him going out and just getting those W's when they're there. You're going into a tough road trip that we've circled on this year of being like, this is going to be tough. Depending on when you're listening to this episode, you look at Baltimore, and you look at the Yankees, right? Measuring stick, especially on the road. You got 7 games in a row with them, and then the trap series in Washington. And last year, I believe Washington won the series with us. So if I can remember correctly, I think it was last year. Anyways, if you have that series right now in Washington, I'm like, you got to go out there and get 3. But it's at the end of this gauntlet with Baltimore and New York. Coming up here with these 7 games, I'd love to see the Mariners get through the Baltimore New York stretch at 3-4 or 4-3, somewhere around there, to where you can go into Washington, hopefully healthy, and go in there and really pick up the pace. Or you could go in there and pick up the W's and come home with a winning road trip.
Yeah, that is absolutely ideal. I mean, you don't want to come back and be at 500 or less after this road trip. You just want to tread water and, like you said, play about 500 and maybe split with. It's just a 2-game series versus Washington. Is that correct?
No, it's 3-game series.
Oh, it is 3. Okay, so yeah, you're going to want to, play 500 between those 2 gauntlets of Baltimore and the Yanks. And the Yankee Stadium's just a different animal. We know that. Playing in there and how games can get crazy just like Fenway. So yeah, you just want to be around 500. Hopefully we can play better and really, surprise some people and come back, instead of 3 games above 500, 6. But the main thing is just to come back home after this road trip and be treading water, like I mentioned a minute ago, and play around 500. So you feel pretty confident. I mean, it's going to be tough. Baltimore, they went out and got their Luis Castillo and Burns to bolster their pitching staff, which they needed. They got the young players that are great players, and we all know how New York is. So it's going to be a good test for the Mariners.
Yeah, they're lucky right now. They're not going to see Garrett Cole, but Yankees are a team that is going to either finish first or they're going to be a wild card team or contender. We talked about this a little bit. It's not a shoo-in anymore that you're going to get a couple teams out of the West. So these are important games too. I do think like the winner of the West is going to be the only representative if things keep going the way they are going.
For sure.
But let's just say you do get in a wild card situation. Maybe Texas gets hot or Houston goes on a run or whatever. These games are huge with teams like Baltimore and New York. Other thing I wanted to bring up that goes back to our whole thing about at the beginning about not running people into the ground. The Mariners go on this 10-game road trip and immediately have a Monday game, 4-game series with Houston right into Anaheim. The Mariners do not have a day off until June 3rd.
Yeah, I think I heard Blowers mention that they're playing like 30 games in 31 days or something. And I do want to mention one thing you mentioned about the AL West. Those teams that are right now just a few games behind us in Texas and Houston, a little bit farther behind. And I mentioned the Mariners making moves. You know damn well if the trading deadline and the standings are what they are right now, those teams are going to go out and add.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, we're the only team in any of this playoff scenario of any of the contenders, any of the big contenders. We're the only team out of all of them. You can go to the National League, you go to the American League, you can go to the Canadian Football League. We're the only team that money is going to come down to it. These other teams are going to trade shit, have the money, be willing to bring people in and take the big risk.
Yeah.
So it isn't just are the Mariners going to do it. They're going to get up against everybody else that is known to do these things, and that's what is frustrating. And we might be closer to the trading deadline. Maybe not, just about, but we might be closer to the trading deadline than we are from the first pitch of the season. We're getting that. Definitely from the start of spring training. So when anybody goes, whoa, We're talking about that way too early. It's gonna be here in a minute.
Yeah.
It's going to be here soon. And guess what? You don't have to wait to pull the trigger to the deadline. I would prefer them pull the trigger around game 90.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about just, you and I about how San Diego went out and got a rise, from the great 400 hitter, 300 hitter from Miami. That would have been a guy that makes contact. That would have looked great in a Mariners uniform. But yeah, they went and pulled the trigger early. Yeah, it would be nice to see the Mariners do something. It's just they have no track record of it, and they're always playing with thin margins. So it's just the way Mariner baseball's been for us.
Well, we got a good fun road trip. I'm really looking forward to these series coming up here. And the Mariners are playing good baseball. They're not playing their best baseball, but they're playing good baseball. You win 8 series out of 9. I mean, on paper, you take it. Is it frustrating? Because yes, we are getting a different identity from the bullpen, or we're getting a different identity, outfit, mask, hat, logo, totally just getting a different offense every game. So once this offense starts to find its identity, and you think it's starting to get closer to finding that than it has from the early part in April. I mean, this team is already a good team, but for this team to be a great team, they have to take that step offensively, and everybody knows it. But I'm hoping we're going to see it, especially in New York with the home run totals. I know Baltimore's got a huge field, kind of similar to Safeco, or similar to T-Mobile Park. It's not an easy home run anymore. But look, that's the way that the Mariners team is built. Actually, I really like our pitching matchups in Baltimore, especially with the confines that they have there.
Yeah, I agree with you. They've made it such a more fair park, or actually a pitcher's park, with the way they moved left field back so far. So yeah, I agree with you. If you ever get a chance, go check that stadium out. It's beautiful. But yeah, those games are going to be tight. We've remembered the last 2 years playing series, not only there, but back home here. Some really tight games that are heartbreakers, and also that we have been able to pull out. So it's going to be an exciting weekend of baseball.
Yeah. And then the games are starting in just a little bit. So we got to cut this episode down. This is a quick turnaround because we just didn't feel like doing an episode yesterday right after the game. So that's our own fault. But anyways, thanks for liking, subscribing, all that good shit. Thanks to MVP's Bar and Grill for hosting me right here on Highway 99. They got fucking more TVs than you can shake a stick at. Come up here and check out your games. They're big on the Mariners game, big on the Seahawks game, but right now it's Mariners season. Come check them out. They also have a beer pong table here that's I've never seen 2 people ever play beer pong at this table. It's always like a solo game with somebody. It's pretty interesting.
I bet you football Sundays, I bet it's pretty packed.
Yeah, as soon as I get done recording this, I am going to be playing a little Super Nintendo that they have right here. A little bit of Mario Kart. Trying to put up some new PRs. Anyways, again, thanks for liking, subscribing. With that said, Hanno, you know what time it is. Sure.